When I called my mom to remind her that my wedding was just 2 weeks away, she let out an exhausted sigh and said, "I can't make it, sweetie. Your sister's impromptu engagement party is that weekend, and she needs me more." When I reminded her that my date was set a year ago, she cold-heartedly replied, "Well, you're marrying a nobody. Your sister is marrying into the wealthy Hayes empire." She hung up on me, leaving me heartbroken in my empty venue. But what my mother didn't know was that the nobody I was marrying had a secret. On the night of my sister's lavish engagement party, her rich fiancé's CEO father walked in, took one look at my husband's photo on the display screen, and dropped his glass in complete shock. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Maya Linwood, and at 26 years old, I finally learned that the family member who demands the most respect often deserves it the least. Growing up, my home was divided into two distinct worlds. On one side was my mother, Evelyn, and my younger sister, Vanessa. They were obsessed with surface-level perfection, designer labels, country club memberships, and climbing a social ladder built on borrowed money. On the other side was me. I was the practical daughter, content with a simple life, a career in graphic design, and a circle of genuine friends. No matter what I achieved, Vanessa was always the favorite. If I brought home an A, Vanessa was praised for taking a dance class. When I bought my first modest condo, my mother didn't even visit, but she threw a week-long party when Vanessa leased a luxury sports car. The divide became a canyon when I met Liam. Liam was quiet, patient, and deeply grounded. He drove an old pickup truck, wore simple flannel shirts, and kept his private life completely off social media. To my mother, those were cardinal sins. She routinely mocked him over Sunday dinners, calling him an unambitious nobody who would drag me down to a life of mediocrity. When Liam proposed, we planned a charming, intimate garden wedding. The date was set a year in advance. But 2 weeks before the ceremony, my mother called me with news that broke my heart. Vanessa had gotten engaged to Julian Hayes, a man from one of the city's wealthiest real estate dynasties. "I can't make your wedding, sweetie," my mother said dismissively over the phone. "Vanessa's impromptu engagement party is that weekend, and she needs me to coordinate everything." When I reminded her that my wedding date had been locked in for 12 months, her tone turned ice cold. "Well, you're marrying a nobody in a backyard," she scoffed. "Your sister is marrying into the Hayes empire. You can get married anytime, Maya, but this is Vanessa's moment." The sting of my mother's betrayal burned deep, but as my wedding morning arrived, I chose to focus on the love surrounding me. Our ceremony took place in a sunlit botanical garden surrounded by blooming hydrangeas and 50 of our closest friends. Liam stood at the altar looking handsome in a tailored suit, his warm brown eyes filled with unconditional devotion. When he slid the band onto my finger, the quiet peace in my heart replaced the painful void my mother and sister had left behind. My father, who had divorced my mom years ago precisely because of her shallow obsession with status, walked me down the aisle with tears of pride in his eyes. We laughed, danced under string lights, and celebrated true love without a single care for high society pretense. Meanwhile, 20 miles across town at the grandest country club in the state, Evelyn and Vanessa were hosting a glittering extravaganza. My mother had spared no expense, transforming the grand ballroom into a sea of white orchids, silk drapes, and crystal chandeliers. Over 200 high-profile guests, local politicians, and business elites filled the room to celebrate Vanessa's engagement to Julian Hayes. Evelyn glided through the crowd in a custom designer gown, practically beaming as she held court with the city's wealthy elite. With a champagne glass raised high, my mother couldn't resist dropping bitter jabs about her absent eldest daughter to anyone who would listen. "Oh, Maya? She's having some tiny, tragic little gathering in a park today," Evelyn scoffed to a circle of country club socialites, holding her hand over her heart in fake sympathy. I told her to wait, but she was just so desperate to marry that boy. He drives a rusted truck and works some vague job in tech support. It's sad, really. But Vanessa, my sweet Vanessa, always knew her worth. She brought us into the Hayes family. Vanessa stood beside Julian, soaking up the envy of her friends like oxygen. Neither she nor my mother gave a single thought to the daughter and sister they had abandoned, completely unaware that their night of boastful arrogance was about to collide with a devastating reality. The atmosphere inside the grand ballroom reached a fever pitch around 9 o'clock, when the heavy oak doors opened and the guest of honor finally made his entrance. Richard Hayes, the formidable patriarch of the Hayes real estate conglomerate and one of the most powerful billionaires in the state, walked in flanked by his executive board and security detail. Evelyn practically sprinted across the polished marble floor to greet him, dragging a glowing Vanessa by the arm. "Mr. Hayes." Evelyn gushed, bowing her head slightly in sycophantic respect. "We are so deeply honored you could grace us with your presence. Your son Julian has been an absolute dream, and we are just thrilled to welcome your family into our circle." Richard Hayes gave a polite, measured nod, taking a glass of vintage champagne from a passing waiter's tray. "Congratulations to you both," he said, his deep voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the surrounding crowd. "Julian speaks very highly of your family." Just then, the grand digital display screens surrounding the ballroom shifted. An automated social media slideshow was playing on loop, pulling recent tag notifications from family members. My father, who was sitting at my wedding reception enjoying himself, had uploaded a photo of Liam and me cutting our modest three-tiered cake, tagging my mother in a subtle jab with the caption, "Celebrating the true happiest day of my daughter Maya's life." As the high-resolution photo flashed across the massive 10-foot LED screen behind the main stage, Richard Hayes glanced up casually. The moment his eyes locked onto Liam's face, the billionaire froze completely solid. His face drained of all color, turning a ghostly, ash-gray shade. His grip on his crystal champagne glass loosened, and it shattered across the marble floor, spraying sparkling wine over Evelyn's designer shoes. The music faltered, and a sudden, awkward hush fell over the entire 200 guests in the room. "Mr. Hayes." Evelyn gasped, clutching her chest in horror. "Are you all right? Servants, clean this up immediately." Richard didn't even look down at the broken glass. He raised a trembling finger, pointing directly at the massive screen showing my husband's smiling face. "Who is that man?" Richard demanded, his voice cracking with a mix of shock and sheer panic. "Tell me right now, how do you know him?" Evelyn let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh, completely misinterpreting the billionaire's panic as disgust. "Oh, him." My mother scoffed dismissively, waving her hand in the air. "Please ignore that screen, Mr. Hayes. That's just my daughter Maya's new husband, Liam. He's nobody important, just an unambitious boy who drives a beat-up truck. My foolish daughter actually had her wedding today instead of coming here. We don't even consider him part of our family." Richard Hayes stared at my mother as if she had suddenly grown two heads. The color slowly returned to his face, but it wasn't relief, it was pure, terrifying fury. "An unambitious nobody," Richard repeated, his voice booming across the silent ballroom like a crack of thunder. "You ignorant fool. That nobody is William Liam Vance." The entire room went dead silent. The name echoed off the high ceilings, but Evelyn and Vanessa just looked at each other in utter confusion. I don't understand," Vanessa stammered, clutching Julian's arm. "His name is just Liam. His middle name is Liam." Richard roared, stepping directly into my mother's personal space. "William Vance is the reclusive founder and majority shareholder of Vance Global Infrastructure. He owns 80% of the primary fiber optic network in North America, and more importantly, his firm holds the master mortgage debt on every single commercial property my company owns." Evelyn's mouth fell open, her eyes widening in absolute horror. "My entire empire, this country club, my skyscrapers, my family's fortune, exists because William Vance permits us to operate on his capital." Richard shouted, his voice shaking with desperation as he turned to his son, Julian. "Do you realize what you've done? You allowed your future mother-in-law to insult the most powerful private investor in the country and boycott his wedding." Julian looked at Vanessa like she was poison, instantly yanking his hand away from hers. The high society guests who had been sipping champagne moments ago began whispering frantically, pulling out their phones to look up the mysterious billionaire founder. Richard Hayes grabbed his coat, glaring at my mother with icy contempt. "If William Vance calls in our debt because of your family's arrogant disrespect, my company will be bankrupt by Monday morning. This engagement is over." The fallout at the country club was instantaneous and chaotic. As Richard Hayes stormed out with his executive board, Julian gave Vanessa a look of pure disgust, handed her back her engagement ring, and walked out without saying another word. The high society guests who had spent the evening flattering my mother suddenly scattered like roaches, leaving Evelyn and Vanessa standing completely alone in the middle of a ruined ballroom, surrounded by shattered glass and abandoned champagne. Less than an hour later, as our quiet garden reception was winding down, the heavy wooden gates swung open. My mother and sister came sprinting into the garden, their designer hair disheveled, makeup smudged, and faces red with frantic tears. Evelyn practically fell to her knees at our table, grabbing my hands with a desperate, trembling grip. "Maya, my sweet girl." Evelyn sobbed, her voice dripping with artificial, suffocating devotion. "Oh, you look so breathtaking. We realized we made a terrible mistake. Family is everything, and we just had to come celebrate with you and your brilliant, wonderful husband." Vanessa stood behind her, trying to manage a pathetic, pleading smile. William, we are so happy for you both," she whimpered. I looked down at my mother, then slowly withdrew my hands from hers. "You didn't come here because you love me, Mom," I said calmly, standing tall beside Liam, who gently placed his hand on the small of my back. "You came here because you realized the nobody you threw away holds your precious lifestyle in the palm of his hand." "Maya, please," Evelyn begged, tears streaming down her face. "Tell him to help the Hayes family." Julian broke off the engagement. "If you just talk to William, you can fix everything for your sister." "My husband doesn't owe you anything," I replied, my voice steady and free of anger. "You chose status over your own child, and tonight, status chose to leave you behind. Do not contact us again." With my father and our true friends watching, my mother and sister were quietly escorted out of the garden. Over the following months, Liam's firm restructured the Hayes debt, forcing Julian's family to sell off their luxury assets, while my mother and sister were left socially bankrupt and completely shunned by the elite crowd they had sacrificed everything to join. Looking at Liam as we drove off into our simple, quiet future, I knew I had won the only thing that truly mattered: genuine love. If your mother skipped your wedding for your siblings' party, would you have forgiven her after a moment like this? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to let me know which city you're watching from.